Welcome to AI Near and Far, the podcast where we talk with creators, innovators, business executives, and curious minds who are using AI to transform the way they work, think, and create. I'm Brad Moss, the CEO of Enhanced AI and the host of this podcast. In each episode, I sit down with someone who's putting AI to use in real, meaningful ways. We'll explore how they've used AI in the past, what they're building right now, and where they see it going in the future. Along the way, we'll dive into their personal takes on the opportunities, challenges, and surprises that come with this fast-moving tech. This show is here to spark ideas, share insights, and help you enhance your own experience with AI. All right, so we're excited to announce a brand new interactive feature for our listeners. As we are brainstorming and knowing that we're AI first, we're starting this week that each episode will come with its own AI-powered chatbot, and it's linked in the description of this episode. So the chatbots are designed to answer your questions as if you're talking directly to the guest. So it's trained on their insights from the show and their public work. So you can dive deeper, explore their ideas, or even ask follow-up questions we didn't get to during the interview. Just click on the link and start chatting with this week's guest. All right, here we go. Another episode here. We're here with Chase Huntzinger, who is an experienced business person and consultant with a lot of financial background experience at Microsoft and GitHub and Intel. And now he's transitioning into some of the world of startups. But with such a deep background, we were excited to bring Chase on here and talk about his experience with AI and his view of the world. So Chase, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for bringing me on, Brad. This is fun. I was excited when I got the email.
Yeah. We've interacted a few times before, several times, as you started looking to AI and you were looking at platforms that can help you scale, and that's, I think, where we kind of met, right?
Yep. We talked a little bit a couple months ago, and you gave me some background on what you guys are doing with enhanced AI and Flux Prompt, and I thought it was awesome. It's really cool.
Yeah, great. So Chase, welcome to the podcast. Really excited to have you on, and excited to talk more about your past and where you see AI fitting into the future, etc. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Excited to talk today.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we did meet. We met a couple of times as you were looking for a platform, to help scale some AI development and some things inside the AI space. Tell us kind of where you've been in your career and kind of what led you to where you are now, which is kind of doing some more startups. But you've gone through kind of the full big path, working with a lot of the big guys here, like we talked about with Microsoft and GitHub and Intel, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I feel like I took kind of a non-traditional approach to get into the startup space. My background is actually in economics and finance. So, no computer science degree. Originally started my career in banking with Goldman Sachs before transitioning to big tech with Intel, Microsoft, GitHub. And kind of everything really changed. The trajectory changed actually because of AI. So I had started with Microsoft in November of 22, basically right as ChatGPT exploded. So I joined, and within a couple weeks, I had gone from never hearing about ChatGPT to getting an email from a coworker that was like, "Hey, there's these things called LLMs that they seem like they're going to be big. You should probably pay attention." Pretty much overnight, my career changed, and it was exciting because for a non-technical background, working in a technical space, you go into a lot of conversations, at Intel, sometimes with computer engineers and software companies, and you just don't necessarily understand what's happening behind the scenes powering the products. But I definitely I drank the Kool-Aid with large language models because for somebody that has a background in statistics and regression and econometrics from my economics background, they make sense to me. Like I understand, how models are refined and trained and how context can make them more accurate. So I got really excited, and over the next, 2 years with Microsoft, got to be there as basically the whole world was learning how to build with these at the same time. So learning about tokenizations and GPUs and infrastructure footprints and, how to build features and how, utilization from customers impacted costs. And I just loved it. So I spent a couple years helping launch some really fun and exciting products, and then ended up kind of switching over to the GitHub finance and strategy team, where I helped, manage finances over GitHub Copilot, which was exciting. And then earlier this year, decided here in Utah that I wanted to go strike it out on my own and see if there was anything that I could go and do with the background I had, and that's kind of led me to the point where I am today, which is I currently sit on the board for a AI startup here in Utah that's doing great things. They're called Second Chair AI. They do legal deposition software, and I do financial advisory for them. And then most of my time is spent as a co-founder and CEO at another AI startup. And honestly, like none of it would have been possible probably without the start of AI over the last couple of years. It's just opened whole new doors.
Yeah, that's so awesome. It's kind of proliferating like individual work and effort and workmanship of people, which is just because you can do so much with it.
Yep.
What do you feel like was more like pivotal in your work or like an experience that prepared you for AI? So maybe something that with your time at Microsoft or Intel that kind of prepared you, or Goldman that prepared you for the world of AI as it's exploded.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like the strongest connection for me actually goes back to my undergrad at uh, at Brigham Young University studying economics. A big part of economics and stats is data analysis and regression modeling. And the way that AI models and large language models work obviously is different, way more complex. But behind the scenes, a lot of it is essentially matrix operations. Back in the day at BYU, that was one of the things that I loved about econ was feeding data into a model or like a regression that I created and figuring out ways to make that regression more accurate, either by looking for new variables to feed into the model, making tweaks here and there. And over time, you could make something that was more accurate or got better results or was better at forecasting. And that understanding, I feel like, prepared me to understand the way that large language models and generative AI work really well. Essentially what happens is, I'm going to oversimplify this, but when you think back to the slope of a line with y equals mx plus b, if you have a full data set and points on a graph, you can back into that line of best fit using matrix operations. And the more data you feed that, the more accurate that line will get over time. And that's essentially how a lot of these LLMs work. So, the understanding that feeding the right context to a model can make it more accurate and faster versus, just making something bigger. And there's a lot of information that actually translates over. If you have a background in stats, you can actually understand the way AI works pretty well. And I feel like that really prepared me to understand it a lot better.
That's fascinating. Like, because I feel a lot of folks don't really understand, don't get how it works. Like,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
what do you run across? What are some of like the oddest things or requests people are asking you? Like, oh, can AI do this? Or they're expecting it to do something. Do you have anything that you're like, oh, that's just a no-brainer that it wouldn't work that way?
Sometimes certain math problems, like as a large language model, it's getting better at this, like reasoning and mathematics, but like it's really made for predictive text. I think that the world is getting more comfortable and used to using AI, so some of those odd questions I feel like come less and less frequently.
Yeah.
But it's fun. I love, the economics and understanding behind the scenes of how these models work is so cool. And like once you really understand it, and essentially you're looking at a mirrored human brain and like the intersection of the models with GPUs and kind of how the hardware and software combines, it is fascinating. And it's really hard to not get excited about.
I mean, I explain it like my 8-year-old. Like I use my 8-year-old as an example. Like, well, this is like how AI works. I always say,
Yeah.
hey, if I tell my 8-year-old to go clean his room, he's gonna just clean a few things and come back. But I wasn't specific, of course he didn't tell
Yep.
me exactly what I wanted. But then I
Yep.
also say, if I give my 8-year-old 30 things to do to clean his room, he's gonna do like 5 or 6 and then get confused and come back and
Yep.
like kind of fail. Same thing. AI is the exact same way, right? Like you got to be specific, and you also can't overload it with too much information.
Yeah, and then you run into, different models, is right. Like, so if you gave a chore to your 8-year-old versus your 15-year-old, one of them is more capable of doing things than
Yep.
the other, and it can handle more. So
Yeah. And one
yeah,
was better at math versus the
yeah,
other one is better at poetry, right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And some of these generalized models are actually pretty great. That's what we use a lot of, but still there are some nuances of why one's better, right? Is it Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan or LeBron James, right?
Yep,
They're all amazing basketball players, but like they're different at different kind of skills, right?
yep, absolutely.
Yeah. I love that you can understand with statistics and giving it context. That's one of the biggest things I found with folks is they just think it knows everything,
Yep,
and it
yep.
definitely doesn't know everything. It doesn't know anything really. It just is trying to complete patterns, and you have to give it the information that it needs to kind of to give you really valuable responses. I was just doing something with a client the other day, and they were just trying to throw all this data in, and I said,
Yep.
actually, you gotta structure it, which is kind of odd. Like you wouldn't think about it, but they had to structure the data. It was a spreadsheet, but AI couldn't just understand the whole spreadsheet. They had to break it up into certain chunks that, hey, this section belongs to this domain. This section belongs to this domain. So the AI could read it. And then once it did, it
Yeah.
was awesome. It was like responding with high degree of accuracy.
No, that's absolutely it. And I feel like, sometimes you hear people talk about like, oh, it's just another wrapper. Like somebody built something that's basically a black box that they just feed data into and it spits something out. The ability, like what you're talking about, to kind of tell it where I want you to search and what I want you to use, like that makes all the difference. And one of the ways that I think about it sometimes is like imagine you're standing at the front door of a library and you just ask someone like, "Hey, go find me the answer to this question." If they had to go pour through the entire library and all the books and come back, like they might not bring back what you wanted,
Yeah.
or it's going to take them a long time, right?
Yeah.
But if you can tell them like here's the, what do they call it back in school? The Dewey Decimal numbers, right? These are the books that you need to search through, and even these are the page numbers. Come back and tell me. You're going to get a really good answer, and you're probably going to get it faster than if you just unleashed them in the entire library.
Yeah. That's right. Yep. And so you got to be specific. You got to get the right kind of context for it.
Yep.
So like, what was one of the first things that like surprised you that it couldn't do, or challenges when you looked at AI for the first time?
I think like a lot of us, initially, a lot of the fun for me was making it make funny poems and funny pictures and stuff before you really started to realize everything it could do. A couple months after I first started using ChatGPT, because that was like the initial gateway for me, I wanted to see how good it was at like picking stocks and assessing stock market data. So I had a little bit of background that I made a Python script and like a Jupyter notebook and loaded some like data from Yahoo Finance and basically asked it to try and identify trends based on certain categories. And, one of the things that surprised me at first was how fast, you ran into data limits with tokens. So for like people that maybe don't know too much about the models, there's context windows, right? Like early on, you could only take in like so many words or digits, the term that everybody uses is tokens, and it was fairly small initially, and those tokens stack up really fast if you're using digits in the text you're feeding it. So initially I was surprised by how much I couldn't feed into it, to get the right context and get the right answers out. But over time that's gotten a lot better. I think some of the models now, don't they support like 2 million tokens for some of the latest ones?
Wow.
You can
Yeah,
feed a lot more in.
you can feed a lot more in, but it also has the issue of like it gets lost more.
Oh yeah.
Like
Yep.
you could maybe give it all that context, but you can't expect even to know that context. We found there's certain
Yeah.
times where I'm giving it like everything in the latter half of my context that I'm giving in, it's like
Yeah.
it ignores sometimes. So even with the
Yeah.
large context windows, it still does, it can be too much. You can ask it too much. And I often
Yeah.
say that, I don't know if you remember earlier days, like Anthropic did a whole paper about the needle in a haystack, which they would
Mhm.
upload a document, had like was like 50,000 or 100,000 tokens, and they
Yep.
put one odd thing, and they were trying to see if the AI could find it. And it
Yep.
would. And they're like, that was their test, which was awesome, fantastic, that it could find that the one odd thing. But in reality, when you use this, you're actually like throwing in like 50 to 60 needles of totally
Yep.
different stuff in this haystack because you're like, well, I want you to give this context as I'm this kind of a business, and these are my competitors, and this is the kind of financials I'm looking for, or the
Yep.
projection I'm looking for. So you're giving it like all these needles in this haystack, and this like it's just too much for any.
Yep.
And then I want to I want an output with this of a financial plan, and here's these nuances of how you do it, and whatever. Like it explodes, and like so you you ultimately can't do that.
Yeah,
Do all of that.
yeah, and I think that it still struggles a little bit. I think what makes it way more effective, and you talked about this in one of our conversations earlier, that if you can do some of the heavy lifting behind the scenes and have your own, mathematical models either in software or on your own, and then kind of feed it the little pieces and variables that you actually need it to work with, that's where it
Mhm.
gets a lot more powerful. So if
Yeah.
you can complete some of that early step and then feed it the final steps, it can give like great results in
Yeah.
finance, personal finance, like, profitability, like P&L statements. But it takes a little bit of massaging the numbers for it if you want to get the best results out of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think your goal is kind of what our goal is. Maybe that's why we get along. Is we want
Yeah.
to get 100% accuracy out of these models with the
Oh
stuff
yeah.
that we get. And so when you're normally, and I often say AI is like an 80% technology. Like it's only 80% right if
Yeah.
you really look at it, unless you cram it down and then give it really tight controls of what you're asking it and the stuff coming in. And a lot of people expect it to be 100% technology, and it's definitely not. But there's ways of controlling it when you cram this stuff down and you get really
Yeah.
specific. And then it's amazing that you can get 100% accuracy out of it, but you got to kind of orchestrate all that, right?
Yep. Takes a little bit of work to get there. But once you get there, it is amazing and it can
Yeah.
save so much time.
So on that, like, so as a fractional CFO, services that you do, like, what are others' biggest misconceptions you come across in about like the financial side of AI? Are they expecting you just to throw in, big financials and it spits it all out perfectly, and you're like, wait, we got to get the data right and structured right? Like, what are some of the misconceptions others have found that you've had to help them correct?
Yeah, so on the fractional side, more of what I do is, if this is a company that's building AI features into their software or they're launching a new product and they're trying to make sure that they, price it and sell it the right way. Sometimes it's how do we embed AI in the products we sell without diluting our margins? Or,
Mm.
how do we go and sell this in a way that when somebody uses it a ton, right? Like we don't end up unprofitable on the product. That's where I tend to help more. So, kind of that intersection of like the finances behind their product. I think the biggest place when people are in that area that they can get tripped up kind of comes down to like model selection. So, like, which model do I go with? That can make a really big difference in the finances for your product or your company, as well as how do I get access to the models? And both of those are important. So, like, one way to think about it is like each large language model you can kind of think about as like a car model, right? You've got Ferraris, you've got, Toyota Tacomas out there, that everything has its own purpose, and there's certain models that are good in certain situations. Like some of them are really fast, but maybe they're not as accurate, and some like take a little longer to think. And sometimes there's companies that get in the mindset that like they always need to be on the latest cutting edge thing, where, as this technology advances, there's certain use cases where, hey, the prior model or two models ago, that was good enough for what you need to
Mhm.
do. And the cost falls where you would want, and it's fast and it's quick. So you give good answers to your customers or your internal users without breaking the bank. So that's one area is I feel like where people, maybe pick the wrong model that they can end up in trouble from a financial perspective or user experience. The other one is how you get it. So there's actually most people, when we talk about AI, if you're using APIs to connect to your software, most of the time they're on like a pay as you go basis that you just pay for the tokens you consume. There
Yep.
are actually hosted solutions out there called provisioned throughput. So Azure offers this, AWS, Google Cloud offers it, that you can kind of think about it as you reserving like GPU space or bandwidth. That if you're saying like, hey, I want access to a certain amount of AI speed at any time, this is what I'm going to pay for and guarantee it. And what that means is, if you're using something that your users need answers super fast and you cannot afford to, have lag times or, be on a shared GPU cluster with other people that slows you down, there's solutions out there that can actually make it so that you can do that. And I'd say those are two of the areas that end up people have a lot of questions about.
Yeah. So talk about a specific financial scenario with like a model. Do you like, and like, are there certain models you find are better for certain financial tasks?
So generally, I think this goes across the board with OpenAI and with Anthropic. They have, and it's changing with OpenAI. I know with GPT-5, right? They're making it do a lot more. And if you use ChatGPT, it kind of routes you towards which model it thinks is best. So maybe we'll use like Anthropic as an example. In Anthropic's lineup of Claude models, you've got kind of three main ones. You've got Haiku, which is like super fast, maybe not the most intelligent. That's really good for if you're just retrieving information. You've got Sonnet, which I'd say is like there, it's a pretty good model and it has reasoning built in, which means like the model itself can actually stop and think. And behind the scenes, it's basically having conversations with itself to kind of map out
Real
what it needs to
integration.
do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And then you've got Opus, which I have not actually found a valid reason to use yet, just because it's so expensive. But I'd say like the big like difference, and you'll see this across model providers. You'll probably see it with Gemini. You see it with OpenAI's models with like GPT-5 versus 4.0 or 4.0 mini. Those reasoning models, they tend to cost a little more, but they are better for things where maybe you need to think really carefully, or there might be a little bit of mathematics or interpretation of data involved. Those reasoning models are really good. And it might not be the most expensive one in the mix, like it's not Opus in Anthropic's Claude models, but like that Sonnet 4.1 is really good for those numeric use cases as long as you're still feeding it the right thing. You just pay a little more for it. Which is why Sonnet, for example, is one of the chosen ones for developers in Cursor and GitHub Copilot, like Sonnet 4 and Sonnet 4.1, those were like the gold standard for coding use cases because they were so much better at that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. All right, so let's talk about a little bit the future. Like, what excites you the most about the intersection of AI, economics, hardware, user behavior, things that people aren't thinking about right now?
Yeah, so I think that we've kind of been in this, I still feel like we're kind of in the early days of AI. That if you go back and you think about the dot-com era, right? Like even after people were starting to launch websites, there were so many people that were saying people will never shop on the internet or like this isn't going to work or it's just not worth it. And it took a little time for a lot of the value to present itself. I think we're still in kind of that phase that we see the value and there's like use cases where it is amazing and we're seeing more and more use out of it. But like I'm excited about the future because it's just going to keep getting better and it's going to get faster. Now, I think part of that comes down to the hardware that in the future, the data center chips and the GPUs that are powering these models, they are going to be able to pack more transistors, per chip because of other technology and semiconductor manufacturing. So that means like the models that maybe today you want to use, but they take too long, like maybe reasoning models, like they're just going to get faster in the future, which excites me a lot. And
Yeah.
then I think just in general, like the thing that excites me most and why I use ChatGPT in and out every day is instead of needing to like pour through Google links to get access to knowledge to do things you maybe haven't done before, like having that access to knowledge at your fingertips at any moment makes it so much easier to expand into areas that like maybe you couldn't before. So for me, like if I want to go spin up a website using GitHub Copilot and like a web template and Vercel, like I can do that. Not having a CS background, like I can make it work. Or when I'm engaging with clients that maybe I have a question about like taxes or things that beforehand I wouldn't have felt comfortable asking, like it's easier to ask those things. So I just think in general, as we keep moving along in this new era with AI, people are just going to be capable of so much more than they were before. And that opens up opportunities for all of us.
So, but what does that also take away? Like, what do you think about, yeah,
Critical
what does that
thinking.
do? What does that do? Right? Like all of a sudden everyone can do stuff. There are guys like you that are the builders out there that are ready to go, 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 build, 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 but not everyone's like that. So how does that shape, economics and what we're facing?
I think that over time, whether we like it or not, there are probably certain subjects that in school maybe get less weight than before. And I'm probably meaning more in like higher education. Like everybody has fundamentals they need to learn. But I think AI literacy and learning how to use AI like in your work and your personal life ends up being really important. Like everybody should know how to use it. And I talk with business owners that, sell trailers or, salon owners. Yeah, I had talked with one last week that like they pay for GPT subscriptions and they're using it. I think it's going to be important for people to learn how to use it. I think the thing that worries me more is over time, critical thinking and making sure that we don't become over reliant on using AI for everything and making sure that like we as humans are still creative and can think up new solutions without needing to turn to something all the time. And I don't
Yeah,
know
I
where
don't
the
know.
balance is for that.
Yeah, like it's nice to say we should watch out for this, but human nature is just going to be like it's a human principle. I want to get more results by doing less work, right? Like that's
Yeah. Yep.
like that's how it always is. And by in general, the general population. So I actually think it's fascinating to think through like who are the people that are excelling, and maybe it's a different type of person or persona than have excelled in the last 50 years where there's a lot of like really go-getter really smart entrepreneurs out there, but they just don't hit the right product or hit the right stride or whatever, and
Yep.
maybe those are the people who are doing more and actually succeeding more because they don't have a comfy job and they're used to being uncomfortable. It seems like with AI, if you are used to being uncomfortable, you can actually excel because exactly your point. I could learn anything. Like I could learn all the details really swiftly in becoming a finance manager at a company. And it's not that I need that full time. I could be my own fractional, perhaps.
Well, yeah.
But not
Yep.
everyone's going to want to do that. Most people want to just, in general, you go learn a trade and then you go do that trade. But now that's almost getting broken down.
That is a great point. And I feel like it's the ones that are curious and are willing to step outside their comfort zone that AI is going to open new opportunities. And like that's been the case for me even in the startup that I'm working on right now. There's questions that I can ask about UX and how do I use Figma and what's your thoughts on this feature and this button, and I can get feedback from something that's seen a lot of successful products. I can bounce ideas off, and it's just made me so much more productive. And
Yeah.
I'm loving it. But it definitely takes being willing to explore new stuff.
Yeah, and new methods of ways of doing things. Like I have a vision of how actually UX should be done. It's totally different than how it's currently done. That
Yeah.
AI enables. And
Yep.
anyway, it's interesting as you start expanding that, but it is like the day job. I don't think a lot of those go away not immediately, but when do they, and how does that shift happen over time? Because AI can obviously start doing a lot more of our regular day work now than
Yeah.
it used to, right?
Yeah. And I think that jobs change, and I think that there will likely be some that there's just not as many jobs available as there were before. But like I said, for those that are willing to step outside their comfort zone, I think there's a lot of opportunity out there right now. It just might
Yeah,
mean a future that might look a little different than maybe you thought it did in the past. And like that's been
yeah,
my case. My
yeah,
job has changed and looks different because of it, but I'm happy with it.
yeah. It's also about the economics. Like we're in just a
Yeah.
weird economic situation right now. Of yeah, my job might be. I can now do the job of five people, but I'm only getting paid the job of one person, and does that stay? And companies expect that.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see as it shakes out. There's a lot of big companies who are making a lot of big gains, and hopefully that trickles down to. Anyway, we could talk about economics
Yeah.
for a long
Yep.
time.
How do you do
And
it fairly?
you guys just get bigger, and everyone else gets squeezed,
Yeah.
right? When you start really thinking about it. Okay, so, I mean that was like that was one of the things, but the last question here is like what keeps you up at night about the direction AI is heading, and then what gives you the most hope about the direction AI is heading.
What keeps me up is probably exactly what you described. Coming from a financial background and working at public companies in the past, right? Like when you work for a public company, they've got targets for profitability and they want to find ways to get there. You know, I, I I can see the worry of, maybe certain things that I do being replaced or done by someone on their own. I think that that's enough to keep a lot of people up at night. And I'm trying my best to kind of adapt and think through how else I can drive value in the services I provide, whether
Hmm.
for an employer or as a consultant, and doing my best to keep up with that. So that keeps me up at night a little bit. But I think what excites me the most is when I think about, what's the world going to look like for my kids? I've got three kids right now that they all use ChatGPT, like not they use it, but like they talk about it when they have a question. Dad, ask ChatGPT. And there
Yeah,
are certain things like the through my career work-wise that like there's certain areas of work that just like haven't been fun. I'm excited at the concept that some of that more monotonous, repetitive stuff, like as we automate that away someday, I hope it opens up more opportunities for my kids to do things that they're passionate and excited about. And I'm excited to see like what doors open in the world of technology for my kids in the future, and if it allows them to live an easier and more exciting life than maybe we saw 10 years ago. So I'm
Yeah.
super hopeful. I
Yeah.
definitely am pro AI and where we're going. And I don't know what the world's going to look like, but I do believe that it's going to bring so much more good than anything that could keep us up at night.
Well, awesome. Well, great. Well, Chase, this has been super fun chatting with you, getting to know your perspective, and just discussing all things AI, which we love, and we'll do it all day long because it's an exciting time that we live in.
Yeah.
So thanks again for coming, for being on the podcast, and hopefully we get to actually do it again sometime. It'd be fun.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity, Brad. It was fun.
Okay, great. All right. Hey, thanks, Chase.
Okay, we'll see you.
That's it for today's episode of AI Near and Far. Big thanks to today's guests for joining us and sharing their story. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure you follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. If you prefer to watch these episodes, you can find them all on YouTube. And if you're feeling generous, please leave a quick review. I'm Brad Moss, and thanks for spending some time with us. We'll catch you next time as we continue exploring how real people are using AI to shape what's next. Until then, keep on building.